In a groundbreaking discovery that rewrites our understanding of Roman entertainment culture, researchers have found the first direct physical evidence of gladiatorial combat between a human and a lion. The proof lies in the skeletal remains of a young man buried nearly 1,800 years ago in what archaeologists now recognize as one of the world's best preserved gladiator graveyards, located not in Rome itself, but in the northern English city of York. The story begins when proposed development in the Driffield Terrace area of York triggered an archaeological evaluation that would eventually revolutionize our understanding of Roman Britain. Located about a kilometre southwest of York's city centre, this unassuming plot of land sat along the major Roman route between York, then called Eboracum, and London. What archaeologists discovered there defied all expectations. Excavations here revealed 82 skeletal remains and 37 cremation burials dating from the 1st or early 2nd centuries to the late 4th century AD. But these weren't ordinary Roman burials. Nearly 70% of the bodies had been decapitated, a rate more than 10 times higher than typical Roman cemeteries. Even more unusually, most of these decapitations were performed from back to front, a method typically associated with execution rather than burial ritual. The demographic profile was equally striking. With the exception of one woman and 7 children, all the remains belonged to robust men between the ages of 18 and 45. Their bones told stories of violence, healed craniofacial fractures, broken teeth, fractured metacarpals, and vertebral injuries consistent with repeated interpersonal combat. These were not the remains of ordinary citizens or even soldiers, but of men whose lives had been shaped by systematic, ritualized violence. Isotopic analysis revealed another crucial detail. These men came from across the Roman Empire. Their bone chemistry indicated origins spanning from the Middle East to Scandinavia, reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of gladiatorial troops who travelled the empire to fight in provincial arenas. One individual even showed heavy iron rings around his ankles, likely shackles worn during life, a poignant reminder of the enslaved status many gladiators endured. Among these warrior athletes lay Skeleton 6 DT-19, a man whose final moments would provide unprecedented insight into the brutal realities of Roman spectacle. Aged between 26 and 35 at the time of his death, he stood approximately 172 centimeters tall, physically robust like his cemetery companions. His isotopic profile suggested origins in a warmer climate than Britain, possibly from southern or western regions of the empire. Like many others at Driffield Terrace, he had been decapitated with a single cut between the 2nd and 3rd cervical vertebrae, delivered from behind. But it was the additional trauma that caught researchers' attention. Scattered across both sides of his pelvis were a series of puncture wounds and depressions that defied easy explanation. These weren't the clean cuts of a sword or the broad trauma of blunt force weapons. Instead, they appeared to be bite marks. The left side of his pelvis bore 3 distinct depressions along the iliac crest, the prominent bone ridge that forms the upper edge of the hip. The largest was a deep circular depression, 6 millimeters in diameter and 4 millimeters deep, accompanied by smaller punctures and indentations. The right side showed a row of 3 closely spaced marks near the anterior superior iliac spine, including a triangular lesion and circular depressions. Small bone fragments adhered to these wounds, pushed into the lesions at the moment of impact, clear evidence that soft tissue was present when the trauma occurred. For years, the true nature of these injuries remained uncertain. Early analysis suggested animal involvement, but definitive identification required sophisticated forensic techniques that weren't available when the skeleton was first studied. It wasn't until recently that researchers could apply cutting-edge 3D scanning technology to solve this ancient mystery. Using structured light scanning, scientists created detailed 3-dimensional models of the bite marks, allowing for precise measurement and comparison with modern forensic evidence. They then obtained bite mark samples from lions, tigers, leopards, and other large carnivores at contemporary zoological institutions, creating a comprehensive database of felid dental impressions for comparison. The analysis was conclusive. The size, shape, depth, and pattern of the wounds matched those produced by large cats, most likely a lion. The curvature of the bite marks within the bone, the penetration depth relative to canine tooth length, and the clustering pattern all aligned with known characteristics of felid attacks. Bears, wolves, and other potential culprits were systematically ruled out based on their distinctive bite patterns and attack behaviors. Crucially, these bite marks showed no signs of healing, indicating that the encounter with the big cat occurred at or very near the time of death. This wasn't scavenging damage from a corpse left exposed to predators, but evidence of a fatal confrontation between a living man and a lion. To understand the significance of this discovery, we must delve into the spectacular and brutal world of Roman animal hunts, known as venationes. These weren't mere exhibitions of exotic creatures, but carefully orchestrated spectacles that combined entertainment, political messaging, and displays of imperial power over the natural world. The tradition began modestly in 186 BC when lions and panthers were first hunted in public games, but it quickly escalated into events of staggering scale and complexity. By the height of the Roman Empire, venationes had become elaborate productions requiring months or even years of preparation. When Emperor Titus inaugurated the Colosseum in 80 AD, the celebrations included a venatio lasting over 100 days, during which more than 9,000 animals were killed. Emperor Trajan later surpassed this record with games spanning 123 days and claiming 11,000 animal lives. The logistics behind these spectacles were mind-boggling. Exotic animals had to be captured across the far-flung provinces of the empire, from African lions and leopards to Indian tigers, Germanic bears, and British bulls. Specialized hunting teams, often composed of military units exempt from regular duty, scoured the wilderness for suitable creatures. The Telegini, a North African corporation of animal hunters, became so successful that they not only captured beasts, but also trained fighters and hired out complete hunting teams to cities across the empire. Transporting these animals to Roman arenas required sophisticated infrastructure. Purpose-built ships carried precious cargo across the Mediterranean, while overland routes featured way stations with feeding and watering facilities. The mortality rate during transport was enormous, making live exotic animals incredibly expensive by the time they reached their destinations. The human participants in these deadly encounters fell into several distinct categories, each with their own training, equipment, and survival prospects. Professional beast fighters, known as venatores, were skilled warriors who received extensive training in specialized schools called ludi. Unlike common gladiators who fought other humans, venatores studied animal behavior, learning how to read the subtle signs that preceded an attack and mastering techniques for surviving encounters with different species. These professionals were typically armed with spears, sometimes swords, and wore protective tunics reinforced at vital points. They understood that bears attacked differently than lions, that tigers were more unpredictable than leopards, and that elephants required entirely different tactics than wild boar. The best venatores became celebrities, their names recorded on mosaics and inscriptions that celebrated their victories over particularly fearsome opponents. At the opposite end of the spectrum were the condemned criminals and prisoners of war who faced the beasts in damnatio ad bestias, execution by animal attack. These unfortunates were thrown into the arena with little or no protection, their deaths serving both as entertainment and as a stark warning about the consequences of defying Roman authority. Christians, rebels, army deserters, and common criminals all met their ends in the jaws of carefully selected predators. Between these extremes stood the bestiarii, a category that included both volunteers seeking glory and slaves compelled to fight. Some were former criminals who had been given a chance to redeem themselves through combat, while others were gladiators who specialized in animal encounters. The man found at Driftfield Terrace likely belonged to this group, trained enough to survive multiple encounters, as evidenced by his robust build and healed injuries, but ultimately succumbing to a foe whose power exceeded his skill. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this discovery is its location. York, while an important Roman military and administrative centre, was thousands of miles from the natural habitat of lions. How did an African predator end up in an arena in northern Britain? The answer reveals the extraordinary reach of Roman logistical networks and the empire's commitment to bringing metropolitan entertainment to even its most remote provinces. York wasn't just any provincial outpost. It served as the headquarters of the 6th Victrix Legion, and later became the capital of Britannia Inferior, one of the empire's northern provinces. The city hosted emperors, including Septimius Severus, who spent his final years there. Archaeological evidence suggests strong connections between York and North Africa during the 3rd century. Pottery analysis has revealed ceramics made in York using North African techniques, indicating the presence of skilled craftsmen recruited from modern-day Tunisia. Large quantities of North African amphorae found in the city demonstrate regular trade connections. These links likely facilitated the transportation of more exotic cargo, including the lion that would ultimately claim the life of skeleton 6DT19. The journey itself would have been an epic undertaking. The lion was likely captured in North Africa by professional hunters, then transported by ship across the Mediterranean to Roman ports. From there, the route probably led overland through Gaul and across the English Channel to Britain, requiring specialized cages, experienced handlers, and enormous quantities of food and water. The survival of even a single big cat through such an ordeal represented a tremendous investment of resources and expertise. The presence of lions in York's arena reflects the political importance of public spectacles in Roman society. These weren't merely entertainment, but carefully orchestrated displays of imperial power designed to reinforce social hierarchies and political loyalties. By bringing exotic predators to distant provinces, Roman authorities demonstrated their control over the natural world and their ability to mobilize resources on a scale that dwarfed local capabilities. For the citizens of Roman York, witnessing a lion in combat would have been a visceral reminder of their connection to a global empire that stretched from the Scottish Highlands to the Sahara Desert. The fact that their city could host such spectacles placed it firmly within the Roman cultural mainstream, distinguishing it from the unconquered territories that lay beyond Hadrian's Wall. The games also served more immediate political purposes. Local magistrates, legionary commanders, and visiting dignitaries used spectacular venationes to demonstrate their wealth, generosity, and loyalty to the emperor. The cost of importing and maintaining exotic animals was so enormous that only the most powerful figures could afford such displays, making them effective tools for political competition and social advancement. The circumstances of Skeleton 6 DT19's final combat remain shrouded in mystery, but the evidence suggests a scenario both tragic and dramatic. The pattern of bite marks indicates that the lion attacked him from multiple angles, targeting the prominent bones of his pelvis, areas that would have been easily accessible if he had fallen or been brought down during the encounter. The fact that he received proper burial alongside two companions, with horse bones placed above them, suggests that his death was not seen as shameful, but as an occupational hazard of a dangerous profession. His comrades from the gladiatorial school, or perhaps members of his fighting familia, ensured that he received appropriate funeral rites despite his violent end. The subsequent decapitation, while initially puzzling, likely served either as a mercy killing if he survived the initial lion attack, or as a ritualistic element of his burial. Many gladiators at Driffield Terrace received similar treatment, suggesting this was a recognized practice within their particular community rather than a punishment or dishonor. The most significant comparable research comes from Ephesus, Turkey, where Austrian archaeologists discovered a gladiator cemetery containing at least 68 individuals. This mass grave revealed 66 males aged 20 to 30, with an average height of 168 centimeters, showing both fatal and non-fatal head traumas that confirmed ancient reports about gladiatorial weaponry and combat rules. Unlike other alleged gladiator sites, Ephesus provided conclusive evidence through tombstones depicting gladiators and inscriptions identifying them by name, including epitaphs for fighters like Columbus. Sophisticated isotopic analysis revealed that gladiators consumed predominantly wheat and barley diets with plant ash supplements and showed evidence of migration from different geographical regions. This comprehensive study from Ephesus warriors rather than soldiers or criminals. As mentioned earlier, the demographic profile of the gladiators reveals the harsh selection criteria of this deadly profession. Of the 68 individuals, 66 were males aged between 20 and 30 years, with an average height of 168 centimeters, completely normal for the Roman population of that era, indicating that exceptional physical stature was not a prerequisite for gladiatorial recruitment. The presence of only one female, likely the slave Serapias mentioned on a tombstone, and one older male aged 45 to 55 years, demonstrates that gladiatorial combat was primarily the domain of young men in their physical prime. The skeletal evidence reveals a sophisticated understanding of gladiatorial weaponry and combat techniques that closely matches historical accounts. 10 individuals showed fatal perimortal cranial trauma, with distinctive patterns indicating specific weapons and fighting styles. Particularly striking was the discovery of a skull bearing twin puncture wounds, spaced 50 millimeters apart, perfectly matching the prong spacing of a trident excavated from Ephesus harbour and dating to the same period. This provides direct physical evidence of the retiarius gladiator type, armed with net and trident, described in ancient sources. The wounds showed characteristic spalling patterns indicating that the middle prong was barbed and angled, designed to hook and pull away an opponent's shield, a tactical detail that brings ancient combat manuals to life. The protective equipment worn by gladiators proved remarkably effective, as evidenced by the distribution of injuries across different body regions. The trauma patterns closely correlate with the known armor configurations of various gladiator types, including Murmillo, Thraex, Secutor, and Hoplomachus fighters. Areas with the heaviest protection, such as the torso and right arm, shield side, showed minimal fatal injuries, while less protected regions like the left side of the head bore the brunt of combat damage. This scientific validation of ancient descriptions demonstrates that gladiatorial equipment was not merely ceremonial, but represented sophisticated battlefield technology adapted for arena combat. Perhaps most revealing was evidence of the strict rules governing gladiatorial contests. Despite the violence of their profession, no gladiator showed multiple fatal wounds, indicating that fights were carefully controlled with referees, enforcing regulations about when combat should cease. The absence of injuries to the back of the skull suggests that attacks from behind were forbidden, while the concentration of fatal wounds on the lateral aspects of the head may indicate the ritualized death blow, reportedly delivered by arena attendants dressed as the god Dispater to dispatch mortally wounded fighters. The medical care provided to these valuable fighters was surprisingly sophisticated, rivaling modern sports medicine in some respects. 16 individuals bore well-healed ante-mortem injuries, including complex skull fractures and limb breaks that had been professionally treated. One gladiator showed a perfectly reduced radius fracture, visible only through CT scanning, while another had undergone a professional leg amputation, with saw marks still visible on the bone. This level of medical intervention reflects the enormous financial investment that gladiator owners made in their fighters, who were compared to expensive racehorses or modern professional athletes. The physical demands of gladiatorial training left distinctive marks on the warriors' skeletons. Enlarged muscle attachment sites on arm and leg bones indicated intensive, specialized exercise regimens, while evidence of subperiosteal hemorrhaging on shin bones suggested the harsh conditioning that prepared fighters for arena combat. These findings provide the first direct evidence of the training methods employed in gladiatorial schools, confirming that fighters underwent systematic physical preparation rather than being thrown unprepared into mortal combat. Dietary analysis revealed the unique nutritional regime of arena fighters, validating ancient sources that described gladiators as hordeari, or barley eaters. Chemical analysis showed double the normal strontium levels in gladiator bones compared to the general population, consistent with a diet heavy in barley and beans supplemented by drinks containing plant and bone ash. This vegetarian diet, while providing adequate nutrition, contributed to increased dental caries among the fighters, possibly exacerbated by stress-induced reduction in saliva production. The elevated strontium levels provide a chemical signature that could help identify gladiator remains at other archaeological sites. The study also revealed evidence of exotic weaponry, mentioned in ancient sources but never before confirmed archaeologically. One femur bore 4 equally spaced puncture marks, measuring 6 mm in diameter with 13 mm spacing, corresponding exactly to descriptions of the cubic fordent, a specialized Eastern gladiatorial weapon. While only a single example was found, this discovery opens new avenues for understanding regional variations in gladiatorial equipment across the Roman Empire. The Ephesus findings fundamentally transform our understanding of gladiatorial culture from literary curiosity to scientific reality. The skeletal evidence confirms that these were not random criminals thrown to their deaths, but highly trained professional fighters operating within a sophisticated system of rules, medical care, and specialized equipment. Their injuries tell stories of individual combats frozen in time: the retiarius, who fell to his opponent's trident; the Murmillo, whose shield failed to deflect a crushing blow; the veteran fighter, whose many healed wounds testified to years of survival in the arena before meeting his final opponent. These discoveries prove that the spectacular accounts of gladiatorial combat found in ancient literature were not exaggerated fantasies, but accurate descriptions of a brutal reality that claimed thousands of lives across the Roman Empire. This discovery of the first physical evidence of man versus lion combat will always stand as a watershed moment in our understanding of the ancient world, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary stories turn out to be literally true.